Directors Work Session on September 9th. My name is Virginia Thomas. I'm Vice Chair of the CA Board. I live in Oakland Mills. Our chair is on vacation, Janet Evans, and she represents Longreach. And our timer for the evening will be Sherry Zavitz. Sherry is representing King's Contrivance. The work session is being live streamed on YouTube. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board website. If you are virtual, please mute your microphones and phones unless speaking. If you have trouble hearing me or any board member or anybody else, please let us know. It's really important that you be able to hear what we're saying, so please let us know. I will now call the roll. Jess?
Here.
Andy?
Here.
Lynn?
Here.
Sherry?
Here.
Dick?
Here.
Tina?
Yes.
Ginny? Here. Lakey?
Here.
Lakey, would you please introduce the CA, any CA staff that may be presenting tonight or that are here?
There are no staff presenting tonight, but here in the room we have Susan Krabby, who is our Vice President and CFO, as well as Dennis Matty, our Director of Open Space and Facility Services.
Thanks, Lakey. Welcome. We need approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve? Dick moved. Second?
Second.
Sherry? Okay. Sorry, I'll get you later, Tina.
That's all right.
Any objection? All right, the vote carries 7-0. Resident speak out next. Just for background, an individual speaking gets 3 minutes, and somebody representing an organization gets 5 minutes. And then the board has an opportunity after each speaker to ask any questions. And the board members are limited to 3 minutes per question, time-wise. Tim Farris first. Is Tim on the line? Hi, Tim. Tim, could you unmute? No, sorry, Tim, we still can't hear you.
Is that on our end? He seems like he's not muted.
Huh.
I assume Drew will come scurrying around the corner.
Tim, do you have any idea if it's on yours? Okay. Drew? Have any idea what might be happening with Tim?
Here he comes.
Difficulties.
Hang on there, Tim. Can you wave if you can hear us? Okay, just hang on for a second, and we'll straighten this out. Thank you so much for your patience.
You double muted.
And I see Brian is lined up next. Do you want us to try Brian and see if, while you're trying to figure out what's wrong with Tim, or should we stick with Tim?
So this is on our end.
Okay.
It's probably because we haven't had any meetings for a month. The system system's not back from vacation yet.
That's true. We've been all, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no public meetings for a month. You're right. Okay, so we'll just cancel tonight and come back in 2 weeks and try again. Okay.
Can I do a reboot, Sam, or what do you want to do? I'm getting no audio out through this. So I think it's the bridge.
Tim, Brian, and Lawrence, we really apologize, but if you'll hang in there with us, we may or may not hear you tonight.
We would surely like to.
That's the only one, so I might
Say move up.
Takes any,
Oh, where's the other keyboard? Right here? See
He doesn't export to the speaker, so.
that? You don't know that for certain.
probably going to have the same problem with Kelly. She's online, she's not
Wait,
coming.
so sorry now?
She's virtual.
Yes.
Okay. So we might as well solve it now.
Yes.
Switch to Kelly.
You know, if needs
Switch
to
over
be,
to
we
the,
can always add on extra time.
Oh, yeah.
Just to
Susan and Dennis, if you want to say something, no, I'm kidding. You want to present? I know you weren't planning on it, but
There we go.
You got a movie for us, Dennis?
That one will.
We could do the open space presentation, because you always get the nice,
Oh,
actually, we could go to any.
That's coming through, that's what-
Lakey, I want to thank you for bringing
That one
in
has to be.
Yeah, that's what it
these flyers. I do want you to know that I contacted somebody in another village.
No, so that means that's what's happening.
Who,
too. We got
I
swapped
just sent
by
that on,
someone.
and she immediately thought of a family down the block
Oh,
Oh, good,
and
good.
sent that information on.
Okay.
So, you
that's-
know, it's just amazing what kind of networks we have here.
Yes,
So that was
yeah.
very
Oh, that's
useful.
wonderful. Thank
to
you.
get it
Thank you
right
very
away.
much.
Starting the meeting with us.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Okay.
The audio bridge, the problem is the bridge isn't working. Quick reboot.
Nice to see
Okay, quick reboot.
some additional attention to this program.
We're just gonna do a
Yes.
quick reboot,
Yes.
so.
All right, everybody, we'll be right back to you. Commercial time.
Should we hum the Jeopardy theme?
What?
They can still hear you, we're just rebooting
Right.
this part.
Someone brings a cane out, like from the Gong Show. Right, right.
Give them the hook.
Right.
Oh, not our guys. We love them. No, don't do that to them.
Yes,
Well, to wait another 5 minutes and we might. No,
yeah.
we're teasing you guys.
So we're still not getting the audio bridge.
We'll check the back. This is the part I hate this move.
I suggest you pay the Comcast bill.
Well,
Finally.
direct that
Susan,
at
talk
Susan.
to her.
Yeah, I was gonna say, direct that at Susan.
Or maybe it's Verizon, whatever it
We
is.
work very
We'll
hard
do a hard reset.
on all things.
Oh, okay.
actually, we're on the county system, right?
We got to save
Broadband.
money where we can.
Exactly.
It is the county.
Every penny counts.
Completely reset.
Look at the rain we've had, it's just amazing, some of the systems that are going out. We got lights flickering, we got all kinds of
Okay, so we're gonna
things
temporarily
going on.
leave.
Not in my
If you
area.
let them know, we're gonna temporarily leave the meeting because we're gonna do a hard reset rather than a soft one.
Sure. The soft one didn't work, okay.
We have to turn this back into those. Oh. Sorry. You gotta hit the icon.
Don't worry, we can still see them on that side.
Well,
oh, I hope our double, what's our new security thing coming up, the double authorization?
I can't hear you. What?
I hope the double authorization program comes out better than this.
Yeah.
Did you get your instructions on?
Yes, I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Me too. I'm just hoping this is not
Yeah,
a
I was working with Dennis when he came in.
portent.
I did the other one. I've gotten 100% 2 years in a row. Hacking or not fishing, fishing begins with a
The
P.
only thing I can think of is maybe the EV bridge.
Oh, this is the big major.
Yeah, this is the, right.
I mean, if we have to, I can just pipe it through.
Supposedly, it's not going
Yeah,
to
that's
take
the
long.
worst case scenario.
Well, I had to print out the directions so I can
was gonna get
study them.
feedback.
We should be fine.
And do they print out in small little print?
Well, I was hoping my son could come over and help me set it up.
Oh, well. That's the 13th, right?
I think we only, yeah, I think we have to be ready by then.
Okay.
Well, we've had quite a few deadlines this month.
This last August that we had off was the busiest month I've had.
I know. What, we met every Friday? Oh, God. And then after,
Plus phone calls.
I was going to say, it's been 40 hours. I want my 15 minutes back for this meeting.
I'll talk fast.
What's the limit on COVID?
That's okay with me.
I think it's reasonable,
Yeah, why not?
you know?
Everything else.
I think it's reasonable.
Right. Anytime you call anybody and say, what's happening? Oh, it's COVID, I can't get anything done.
Crazy, it was working at 4.
Lakey, have you been hearing what companies in Howard County are paying workers? Like, they're going up to almost, I forget which company, $19 an hour?
We gotta pipe in. It's not on.
The long-term care industry is really worried about it.
I think that combined with the sign-on bonuses.
What?
Sign-on bonuses
Yeah,
also
yeah.
significantly, I mean, been doing that since
So
summer.
what impact is that going to have on CA?
Significant. We're
Yeah.
estimating that now.
Yeah, that's what
it
I'm
looks like.
concerned about. And then the lifeguards next year. If you can make 15, 16, 17, in one case it was 19, I forget what store that was. Going like,
Maybe we should offer pensions.
Yeah, let's go back to that. Remember those days?
well, they do get free use of the gym, right? So that's a plus.
Okay, production should be going this week at the bridge now. Let me try the other one.
We could have Tim, Brian, and Lawrence call in, couldn't we?
We could have them, if I set up the meeting.
Well, no, go ahead, keep
let's-
working on this, keep working on
Yeah,
this. Go
let's
ahead.
focus on this.
Have mine.
If we need to, we can also move
Try it
this
now.
to a later point in the agenda.
Yeah, but we'll have them waiting till 9:30, that's
Yeah.
what worries me. Well, no, we'll have the same problem. Kelly's next, and she's going to
that's
be on.
right, she's calling in.
So we're going to have the same problem with,
Okay.
Jessica isn't here, so she'll be,
Correct. she's
so we're
on
going to have problems with Kelly, Jessica.
All right.
Yeah, that would be the only other two, but still, that's major with both of them.
Yeah.
So otherwise, I'd move to Kelly, but
Unplug it
not
and plug it
gonna-
back in real quick. The old adage.
Well, we have 15
Drew,
minutes to
Would it work
do
if I just turn
I think
my
this is a two-person.
laptop
15 minutes.
speaker on?
Sure.
The problem is the
That's
microphones will
another-
cause havoc.
Oh, all right.
This is a two-person
Can't
one.
move this
Okay.
in another 5 minutes.
Did you try?
But that's
swearing?
Jessica, and she's going to be online, too. All the people that we want to go next are online. So
Ginny, I'm going to do the development stuff.
Pardon me?
I'm doing the development,
Andrew.
the general
you're
plan.
doing it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I put together the briefing
So-
and everything.
So
Yeah.
So we just
Jessica's
thought
not going to,
No,
Jessica's doing the next iteration
Half an hour?
on the 23rd, I believe.
right, remember, she's focusing on the 23rd,
okay.
you know.
So you're 4D.
I just realized something.
Thanks. Well, we could start, well, no, we can't because they've got, hear us, they're recording. We can't, I can't switch to you,
That's
Andy.
it, it was specifically linked grabbing from that screen. That's what I thought, grab.
I can't switch to anything because they have to have a right to hear.
You're gonna have to call
It's an open meeting.
They can hear. We just can't hear them. They can hear us.
They can hear? All right.
Yes, they can hear us.
Oh, Okay, let me,
What we're gonna do
Let
is
me,
we're gonna call in, just have this.
well, development tracker, you're not handling that, right?
No.
Jessica is. So I've got a question on that, so that's, let's see.
I barely remember.
Only get the one.
All right, guys, while you're doing that, what I'd like to do is move to 5. Lakey, I think you're going to be some of this. We can't do 5A, that's Jessica, so this is questions only. I know we're jumping around a little bit here, but on the agenda, it's 5. We will skip 5A because if you have any questions for Jessica, we probably have trouble getting her online right now. Any questions do you have on the capital projects and open space updates
Well, could we do the 2 easements?
with Dennis
I
here?
mean, Dennis is here.
As long as you're sure these people can hear us.
Danica, can you hear us?
I was trying to find, Tim, can you shake your head or something that you can hear us? Danica?
Or us.
Brian, is that,
Mike's muted.
can you shake that you can hear us? Brian, can you hear us?
No.
Wave? No, I'm not getting any
Just unmuted us. We were muted.
We were muted while we were trying.
Try it again.
Brian?
Say we're muted. Right?
Brian, can you hear us? Just wave if you can hear us. Yeah, all right. We're going to move to another subject while they're trying to make sure you get online. I will come back to you guys, I promise. This will not take a lot of time, okay?
I got a text. We can hear you.
Sorry about it. All right, let's go to the easements. Dennis, are you ready? That would be 4B, easement request, Long Reach Village Center.
So I think they had to, it was all loaded on the screen, but because they are working on this, it's no longer loaded on the screen. So I
All
have
right.
to.
We have printouts.
Yeah, we have, the packet is on the
Look at the
website.
package, I can,
Does
walk-
We've all
everyone have
seen,
the packet?
we've all seen it on,
Okay.
you
you
know.
won't get the same visual, but I'll walk through it.
Yeah, just,
So the first one is the easement for the signage at Long Reach. And that one is for a shared project with the county to provide new signage for the village center and the shops that are in there. It's on CA property, and we get a prominent placement in the new signage. It's shared cost, although they have most of it. We have, I think we're spending around 30,000 on it. It's probably going to be 100 total. But it's gone to the Long Reach rack, and the county had asked for the sign to be purple, which the rack did not approve. And I would make, and we're going back to them with a different color, and I would make approval of the easement contingent on rack approval, because we're not going to grant an easement for a sign that the rack's not going to approve. Are there any questions?
any questions, anybody?
Thank you, Andy, for sharing your screen.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm just bringing it up, Dennis. I'm slow at this, so please bear. How about
Okay,
that?
well, if there are no questions, let's move on to the second easement.
So the second easement is for a driveway access off of Oakland Mills Road. And Mr. Farish, I think, was going to speak first. And that is an easement request. He's going to, I think he actually has already subdivided his lot, and he wants an access easement for a driveway off of Oakland Mills Road. He's asked us if we would provide the easement for a fee, and we have never done that in the past. We always provide easements if the property is placed under the annual charge. And I don't recommend providing it for a fee, not so much for the annual charge, but if it's not under the covenants, then CA loses control of that property in its entirety. And it's not a big property, but it's right on Oakland Mills Road, and it's very prominent. I would be in favor of it if it was brought under the annual charge and into the covenants. And someone in the future, not Mr. Farish or some, but someone in the future could make that an RV, they could have 10 RVs. And they're RVs, and they could sit them there, and CA wouldn't have any control. So I think if we're going to grant an easement, then I think we would want it under the annual charge and to be incorporated in the covenants for Owen Brown. And so I would recommend approval pending those items. I think he's going to speak asking for fee in lieu of those, but I would recommend against them.
Okay, any questions?
So it sounds like we probably shouldn't make a decision on that until we can hear from him.
Well, we can't vote on it anyway. This is a work session.
They'll show up on our next board meeting.
It'll be on the
That's right.
23rd board
Okay,
meeting, yeah.
fair
Or
enough. So
20
we'll let
20
him say his piece and then we can make a decision at the
Yeah.
meeting.
And the first one, it sounds like you're all favor, or don't have any concerns about the Long Reach one, so we could consider putting that, or Janet could consider putting that on a consent calendar then. All right, second one, we'll think about how we're going to continue to handle that. Okay, Dennis, don't move. While you're there, if we're still waiting, I'd like you to handle 5B, and this is questions only from the board. So does the board have any questions for Dennis on capital projects and open space update which you received? Or do you?
I have a question. It's not related, oh, maybe it is. The project that you guys are doing with the water flow down, was that the Hickory Limb? You described it as Hickory Limb.
Yes.
So, because I've noticed it's been going and going and going, have you finally gotten it fixed the way you want it to be, or?
We're close.
Okay.
But we're not 100%, but we're getting there.
But the issue is the way the water is flowing and trying to get it to behave. Gotcha. Okay.
I could say one other thing. I don't know if
Sure,
you
Dennis.
noticed, but some of the pictures refer to a bridge replaced by culvert. And so that is a stream channel. It's a stormwater channel that's dry most of the time. And there had been a bridge there that wasn't necessary. And the Wind had asked if it wasn't possible in some cases to replace bridges with culverts, which are much cheaper. And so we do this when we can, and this is one of those cases where we could.
Okay.
But
And
was
if I
the
could
bridge,
also say that we've done a lot of work, I've got some time here.
Yeah.
I'm feeling,
No, Dennis, wait a minute.
was the?
Dick, raise your hand so we
I
can get in
had
the
my
queue.
hand
Go
up.
ahead, Dick.
I had my hand up. Was the bridge ready to be removed anyway?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dick. Any, Sherry has a question.
Yeah, first I'd just like to compliment you again and the crew on the bridge replacements in King's Contrivance. They're just beautifully placed. I noticed that the pathways were widened, I think, to accommodate the equipment that was going in there. But I did notice, and I'm sure your crews noticed, how much destruction there has been over time to the major pathways that are leading to both of those bridges. So I just wanted to ask, are they slated for repaving? And if so, are those pathways going to be widened, or will they be kept narrow the way they currently are?
So that the most narrow pedestrian pathway we can put in is 6 feet. I'm not exactly sure how wide that is, but the machines don't go below that, or else it's all handwork. So we try to go at least, and we have some that are 4 and 5 feet. Somebody said there's 3, but I don't think that's possible. I've never seen one that's 3 feet. So that one is slated, and I'll get a schedule for you. But if it's 5 feet, it's going to go to 6. If it's a major connector, we try to widen them, but not every pathway in Columbia is a major connector. And so where we don't have to, we don't widen them.
Okay, so, but their minimum is 6 feet now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Dennis? Andy?
Dennis, is there any other pictures or slides you want to show?
Well, actually, I want to show the video. Can you go to
No,
last?
Dennis, we've got to see if
You got to
we,
move on.
Yeah.
It's only 2 minutes, and it's really, you'll love the ending of it.
all right, Dennis. And we,
It's really, you'll like the ending.
Go
And
ahead.
actually, it's timely because there's been a lot of conversation about the ponds and the lakes.
Dennis, will we be able to
Will
hear it,
we
and
be
will the
able to
audience be
hear the
able to
video?
see and hear it?
Pardon me?
Will we be able to hear the video?
Oh,
We'll see.
I don't know.
Well, try it, but if we can't, let's turn it off right
You
away.
know what, the fact is, I'd say never mind, but Andy doesn't have access to my Google account.
Oh, yeah.
And so you can't get it to these.
And you're not going to give him your password tonight? Okay,
Tomorrow, but
all right. Dennis, thank you for being patient with us. Thank you so much. You guys, we're not ready yet, huh?
I don't
Yeah, I don't do the video.
Let's do, just see how much more we can knock off. President's remarks, follow-up questions from board members to, well, you have to make your remarks.
I was just going to recap that we had sent out the CA Points program, that we are more actively promoting it as the school year gets off the ground. As a quick synopsis, it is an income qualified program, which means that the family has to be eligible for free and reduced meals. And once in that program, they can apply. And each student in elementary through high school in participating schools, and we have a lot more information on our website, has an ability through good grades and good school attendance to earn points that can actually earn for themselves and their families CA memberships for facilities. So it is a program. We're actually in the 21st year of the program. This is not new, but I have found many people in our community are not aware of it, so we wanted to make sure people were aware. My other remark is going to be that we are getting started internally with CA staff on DE&I training over the next few weeks. We have set that up, and we are having all our full-time staff and a portion of our dedicated part-time staff that is year-round. So it will be approaching approximately 250 staff across CA that will participate in a workshop that is a day-long and is focused on identifying bias and really understanding how to be more inclusive in behavior, both as a team member internally, but also in the interaction with our community across Columbia. So that is something that it took us some time to get it off the ground, but very excited we'll be undertaking that.
Thank you, Lakey. Any questions on that? Tina?
I had wanted to ask about the points program. I didn't know if there were any flexibility, especially around attendance, considering that we are in a global pandemic. And if there were any wiggle room about making the program available to kids who are quarantining and not in school technically. I don't know if those are if the school district is counting those as excused or unexcused absence, or if we have any flexibility in that regard at all.
So that is something that has been being discussed by the school system as to how they're treating that. So we are working with the school liaisons. We will defer to the school system, but it's something we've discussed internally, that if it's documented as quarantined, that we would not consider it as an absence like we had in previous years.
Oh, perfect.
And
Thank
so
you.
right now, the school system, and I don't know the details, but they will be designating when a student is quarantining versus just absent from school, because they will still have an opportunity to participate in school.
Thank you.
Actually, then, this has never and will not apply to homeschool children or children that are not in our public school system, correct?
That is correct right now, the way that we have participation from the schools.
So is anybody interested in having that looked at? Maybe not right away, but these are all our children in Columbia.
Do private school children use the farms form and participate that way because it's income qualified?
Some do.
So I don't know if they do the same income documentation that public school kids do
I don't know. I
for
don't
farms.
know. It'd have to be explored as to, there are a lot of kids that do not go to the public school. Do they have, is it worth exploring is what I'm asking you, as to whether children that are homeschooled or schooled in private schools should be just looked at by the staff. I'm not saying we have the answer, but are you the least bit interested in looking at it?
I am.
Not really.
Not really? Okay. Not really, two. Anybody else interested? No, three? Okay, I'm interested. That ends it. Okay. Two interested, three interested. Okay. Dick, did you say no? And Andy, you said no?
I think we should stick with the public schools.
Okay, Andy, stick with,
Yeah, just for the moment, I mean, stick with public
Okay,
schools.
all right.
We can look at this issue down the road.
okay, Sherry?
Yeah, I had a question. These are the schools that are currently participating, and you did mention, this goes back quite a number of years. But there may be other schools that may be interested. And I think that given the changes that have taken place in Columbia, that might be the next step in looking at this and seeing if we can get some other schools interested for the same income groups that we're talking about. So I think that this is a great way of publicizing it. I really, I like so much that we have moved to a Spanish language flyer. I think that's really, really excellent. It's a big step, and so I think just the next thing would be to see if we can bring in additional schools. Thank you.
Tina?
I really want to stand up and leap on the table and applaud what Sherry just said. I agree about bringing in some additional Columbia schools. I think that would be fantastic. So, huzzah. And I would also note, as the school district redistricts its population areas, sometimes our CPRA properties will be sending children to schools that are not in Columbia high schools. So we may need to also figure out how to flex with that as well.
Actually, it's a really good point, Tina. I can give you one example. Thunder Hill Elementary School is not on here. I'm wondering if these are all Title I schools, if that's the rationale. But it's not on here yet. The redistricting sent a huge number from a certain area to Thunder Hill. You're right. And that,
So if I can clarify, and again, I communicated some of this via email, but to be very specific, right now, the criteria we use is that the school is located in Columbia, that there is a 35% proportion or more of free and reduced meals, and that there is walking distance to CA facilities. So once you factor that in, because we don't want to assume that there is availability of transportation. We want to have an accessibility to be able to get to the schools and to get to the facilities. So there are some schools that aren't currently participating because they are 3 to 4 miles away from any kind of CA facility. So again, obviously, the characteristics of how we do the qualification can be modified over time. But as of this year, we invited and have 2 new schools. So again, that is in process and they are participating. So there has been an expansion this year. I would strongly recommend, given the timing that the school year has already started, that if there's any desire to make changes to the qualifications of the programs, we're going to need to look at that for next school year, because this is a program that monitors over the entire school year.
Okay, Tina.
I want to be clear that I'm really grateful that we're considering transportation as one of the accessibility considerations. I also will note that we have just been informed that the RTA buses are now free for students. And so that may expand our definitions as well.
Okay, any other questions on this, the President's remarks? I'd like to just finish one more under 5, and then we're going to move to resident speak out. C, pre-filed legislation, state legislation. You sent us something. Does anyone have any questions for Lakey and in the future for our general counsel on that? No. Okay. So that's finished. All right, let's move to resident speak out, and I want to thank the 3 residents that have been waiting for your patience. We really appreciate it. Tim Ferris, you're first.
Hi there.
Hi, Tim.
Hi there. Thank you for hearing me out here. We, as it was mentioned, do have, when we bought the property about 7 years ago, it was already subdivided, and there's a front buildable lot, and we have, where the house in back where we live was built in 1953, and it's on septic, and so primarily for health reasons, environmental reasons, we wanted to get that onto sewer. So we went through the exercise and got our neighbor, the Verizon Service Center, to agree to an easement, so we were allowed to connect both our house and the future house to that sewer. So that's how this all started. And we already have permission, we've been granted where a driveway can go that will serve both lots. Our concern was that there's a big oak tree that would have to come down where the new driveway needs to go. Additionally, the sight line isn't so great. So we reached out to Verizon thinking it was their land, and they said, sure, you can have an easement for that. And then we started to proceed with our engineers, benchmark engineering, and that's when they discovered that it was the Columbia Association that owned this front section, and that they own that section not on our property, but on pretty much every other piece of property along Oakland Mills, and that it was originally granted with the idea that there was going to be some type of rail or transit up and down Oakland Mills. We abut the Columbia Association's conservation lands, about 11 acres, where in the early thoughts of Columbia there was going to be a high school there, which is not happening. So the land in question isn't necessarily conservation land in the way that we think of conservation land, and the easement that we're hoping for would allow us to have a safer in and out and avoid us cutting the tree down. And the comment about us keeping RVs here or not, part of our attraction, I mean, we lived in Columbia before on Farewell Road, and we've been part of the Columbia Association, and we understand the benefits of being members of that. But part of the attraction to this lot was that it was an outlier, and the house we've designed for up front is going to be a net zero house with a green roof and things that wouldn't be so easily, it wouldn't fit into the conventions of the Columbia Association. So we're going to proceed with those plans. Our hope was that we could just have a better, easier easement into our property.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim? No? Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Next, Brian England, and Brian, you get 5 minutes because you're representing Howard County Citizens Association, is that correct? I think you're muted, Brian.
He is muted.
Oh, no.
There's an actual mute, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yes, my name is Brian England. I live in Hickory Ridge, and I'm part of the Newtown Committee. Today is sort of an anniversary. It's come up in 10 years since I first resident speak out about Columbia redevelopment. Since then, I've worked with J.D. Smith on the Newtown redevelopment process. J.D. and I are members of the ACCA Newtown Committee and put together the most relevant documents to the Columbia redevelopment process called Protecting Our Planned Community, and this is the booklet. And shared them with our current county council, and more recently with Lakey, the county executive. I want to thank you for the really useful development tracker. This has been a valuable resource, and I also want to thank you for the measured, thoughtful response to the Lakeview development. But now we have the development right next door on Bovenland Parkway. The proposed development is similar to Lakeview, which is really interesting. Why would they expect a different result? Because the Columbia Planning Board and the CA will vote against it, along with myself and other people. Strip malls are not allowed where they don't already exist, and that's part of the Howard County General Plan. Now, I know that Jessica spoke to the developers and worked with CA planning, and I just was wondering, really the definition of CA planning. In what way did to develop the work with CA planning? How does CA planning fit in with Columbia redevelopment, the Columbia redevelopment process? Has the CA taken on a different role, maybe the architectural committee? Are they reviewing all Columbia redevelopment plans to see if they conform to the design regulations and covenants? So there's a few questions about the CA planning entity. It's very good. We're very pleased that the CA has taken a more active role, and it should be clear for all those. But it should be really clear for all those where CA fits in with the Columbia redevelopment process. At the moment, if you want to develop a property, say my property, in an industrial park, who do you go to first? You know, Howard Hughes. You have to go to the design advisory panel, the CA board, CA planning, DPZ, village board, all of them. In what order? And what are the responsibilities of each of these entities? There needs to be a really clear and concise Columbia redevelopment process. I asked the board to vote on making the CA a leader in defining and developing a Columbia redevelopment process. I want to make a note here. There's been suggestions that, well, you know, we've got the Whole Code by Design coming up, but the thing is, the county have had their chance to do this. Sorry about that. You know, the county council representatives, the county executives, DPZ, Howard Hughes, have had since the first report which came out on Newtown 14 years ago, and they've done nothing. So I think it's time for the CA to step up, you know, to the plate and do something. So I really, again, I request that on behalf of the HCCA new committee, that the CA vote positively on. I've got a suggested motion, and this motion is this: that the CA president and the CA planning will take a leading role in defining the Columbia redevelopment process that includes enforcement of the current development guidelines and a process to update the guidelines. They also will review the 2007 and 2014 NT recommendations to have a Columbia planning board. So the idea is to come up with a solution and not hang it way around any longer.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Dick? No, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much, Brian.
Okay, thank you. So what do I do with my testimony that I've given? Do I mail it to you? Is that the idea?
That would be great, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, thank you. And thanks for being so patient. Lawrence Schoen, are you online? Lawrence? Well, I guess we either never had him or we lost him. Okay. We're going to number 4 on the agenda, work session topics. The first one, presentation on findings and recommendations, Howard County Housing Opportunities Master Plan. Kelly Camino, Director of Howard County Department of Housing and Community Development, will be presenting. Kelly, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, now we have 45 minutes for this, and I understand that you have about 10 slides.
Yes. It'll be less than 45 minutes, yes.
Okay. Would you like to complete all of your slides, or would you like to have board members stop you when they have a question about a slide that you're on?
I can do either way. It's easier if I finish. It's easier. I've done many of these presentations. It is a little easier if I finish and then take questions.
Okay, thank you. Go.
All right, and I hope I can share. I'm not real good with Google Meet, so let me see.
Well, I think our staff may be trying to help you on that.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Are you able to put up my presentation, or?
Drew, Sam, is there anything you can do to assist?
I think she has to do it.
If she has to do it,
Okay.
they have to give her permission?
No, I think
No?
she should be
She can
able
just do
to.
it?
Do you know where the button is?
Okay, I got you. I see it now. I see a window. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
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 Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Wonderful. That is great. Okay. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak to you this evening regarding the Housing Opportunities Master Plan. As many of you know, the county executive appointed a task force in October of 2019 to do an evaluation of our current housing situation here in the county. And despite the pandemic, we were able to finish this report, and it was released in June of this year. So I want to go over just a couple things regarding the importance of the master plan. And I think in light of the pandemic, many of us will understand how important it is for families to have a home. The home provides not only shelter, but it has served as a place of work and a place for people to be safe. So it's very important to provide housing. In our studies, we found that housing affordability and instability are critical challenges for our community to address. Many of our families are spending more than 30% of their incomes on housing, and many more than we would like to admit are spending more than 50% of their incomes on housing. And this is leaving no money left for food or transportation or medical care or other necessities. When we surveyed our residents, we surveyed them 2 times during the process and had multiple community meetings, but affordability consistently came up as a #1 priority for families that were looking for homes, whether it was rental or home ownership. And our respondents believed that there was not enough reasonably priced housing options available in the county. So one of our recommendations goes to needing a greater number and diversity of housing options. Our challenges are getting bigger. We are very fortunate to be located between Washington and Baltimore. We have, as you know, top-rated schools, but this is putting immense pressure on our county to provide housing for the families that want to live here. We also know that the Housing Opportunities Master Plan did an evaluation of our system, but it's not going to solve many of the challenges that we have. This plan identified what we need to do to address the needs of our existing and future residents, what we can do to strengthen our community by fostering racial and socioeconomic diversity, how we can coordinate policy across the county while supporting our local economy, increasing transparency for our residents and those who live and work here, and mobilizing our resources so that we can make the most impact. The Housing Opportunities Master Plan outlines a number of recommendations, each which varies in terms of scale and impact. But the collective purpose of these recommendations is to increase housing opportunities for people of all ages, income levels, races, and backgrounds. And this will help create a more equitable Howard County for all of us. I'd just like to share briefly the members of the task force. Many of you will know them, members of the school board, members of the Chamber of Commerce, members of some of the village boards, people of different ages and backgrounds to provide a variety of opinions and experiences with the development of the plan, and supported by many members of county staff departments. The plan identified 9 primary challenges facing housing in Howard County, and again, this was after about a year, 13, 14 months of meetings with residents and public surveys and meetings with small groups and organizations here in the county, and also working with our task force and work group meetings throughout the year. Our challenges are categorized into 3 groups. The first is land use planning and zoning. The second is policies and programs, and the third is housing and infrastructure. Regarding the first challenge about housing supply has not kept up with housing demand. Our region is growing as new jobs are created, and these jobs are bringing more workers to the area than the amount of new housing that is being built. And we are currently underbuilding new housing given the size of our workforce. The county has a lower ratio of housing units to jobs than other nearby jurisdictions, and it requires more than 20,000 additional housing units to catch up in these areas. The second challenge is a lack of housing diversity throughout the county inhibits racial and socioeconomic integration. Howard County is more affluent than our neighboring jurisdictions. We have more families, more middle-aged households. This dynamic is partially created by our housing supply, but also the many factors that make our county a desirable place to live, and it is really restricting our supply. The third challenge was new development is less diverse than housing inventory overall. In the last several years, most of our new development has shifted in favor of rental apartments, and the for-sale market has largely stopped building smaller, attainably priced for-sale housing. Challenge number 4 talks about a cohesive strategy so that we can make the best use of the resources that we have. Challenge number 5 talks about how our existing resources are not sufficient to meet current and future capacity and demands, while also dedicating funds to housing goals. Currently, the county does not provide any general funds to affordable housing or housing goals in general. We do receive a small portion of the transfer tax to address housing in the county, but it is not sufficient to help meet the needs of housing, schools, and transportation. Our research found that it was very difficult in the county to find housing for diverse populations such as older adults, persons with disabilities, youth aging out of foster care, returning citizens into the community, and we expect that these populations will continue to grow. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the COVID-19 pandemic has really exposed and exacerbated housing insecurity. We have helped over 1,300 families with rent and utility assistance so far because missing one paycheck meant they could be at the risk of being evicted or homeless. A large portion of the housing that is available to low and moderate income households in the county is older and at risk of deterioration and redevelopment. And you as the CA board are very well aware of Columbia turning 50 a few years ago and how much of the housing stock is older and in need of renovations or rehab. And the last challenge is the adequate public facilities ordinance, which is placing significant limitations on the amount of housing that can be built. And what we learned during our research was that a lot of times it's not new housing that is overcrowding our schools, but it's more the existing housing. And so the adequate public facilities ordinance is preventing new homes from being built and further exacerbating our problem with a lack of supply. At the same time that we identified our 9 primary challenges and categorized them into land use, planning and zoning, policies and programs, and housing and infrastructure, we chose to categorize our recommendations to improve these opportunities in the same 3 groups. Some of the recommendations, there are over 80 in the plan. Some of the recommendations under land use, planning and zoning will help to improve the availability, accessibility, affordability, and diversity of housing. The plan covers ways to use land use policy and provide incentives to produce income-restricted housing units. It looks at ways to enable more equitable growth throughout the entire county through changes to zoning regulations and land use plans, facilitating the development of lower-cost housing topologies such as accessory dwelling units or smaller homes, cottage-style, missing middle, if those of you who have worked on the HOCO by design plan, removing zoning barriers to mixed-use neighborhoods and developments, promoting efficient processes for approving development. Some of the program and policy changes could be improving housing sector coordination and boosting capacity, raising and deploying capital for affordable housing production and preservation, Creating a robust multifamily preservation strategy. One of the things that we don't want to see is as properties age that communities are resold to developers and done something called value add, and then families who are lower income are displaced. Improving housing conditions and promoting and expanding programs that support households with home repair and modification needs, and expanding opportunities for home ownership. And lastly, the last recommendation category is housing and infrastructure. How can we balance the needs of the schools and the housing and transportation and roads and all of the things that support housing, and finding creative mechanisms to fund both housing and schools, attain full development of annual allotted new housing units, and evaluate targeted changes to the adequate public facility ordinance to support the growth required to improve housing affordability and help to house our workforce. And lastly, creatively utilize land assets in the county. There are over 80 recommendations, as I mentioned, so there were 5 that we selected that we could start with. One of them would be to create an interagency housing opportunities task force. This would be made up of different departments within county government or some of our partners in the community, as well as some members of the Housing Opportunities Task Force. Second was establish an affordable housing trust fund. The primary purpose of that trust fund would be to expand the number of income-restricted rental and homeownership units throughout the county. Our county executive did place a request in the FY22 budget for a $5 million seed money for an affordable housing trust fund. That was not approved by the county council. They did approve $2.5 million, but placed it into a contingency account until we could document for them how those funds would be spent. We also wish to look at updating our moderate income housing unit rules and fee structures, and including incentives to encourage additional, more affordable or more accessible production. And also looking at allowing a broader range of housing types to proceed by right without the need for additional approvals, and something like that would be the accessory dwelling units. And lastly, one of the recommendations that continue to come up over and over again is residents don't know where to go to find resources about housing. There are many providers in the county, many departments within the county that all have a hand in certain pieces of the housing puzzle. And so we would like to create a homeowner resource navigator position and website so that residents would have one place to go to find resources about housing. The role of the plan is to provide a comprehensive framework through which the county can continue to advance housing opportunities in the community. Unlike the HOCO by Design plan, which looks at the county as a whole regarding transportation, infrastructure, roads, all the different things, this plan is focusing just on housing. And what we are looking to accomplish is an economically and demographically diverse community, to address our residents that have different needs, and also to provide different options of homes, home types, and affordability levels. We want to see the Rouse vision for Columbia, not that we want the Rouse vision throughout Howard County, but the spirit of that vision, that people have options and have different housing types at different income levels, and all of us can live together and have choices. So that is what we're going for with this plan, and I have sent this to Valerie, and she can share this with you after the presentation of where you can actually find the housing plan to review it in more detail. So at this time, I'm going to stop sharing, and I know that's a lot of information, but I hope most of you have heard some of that because we were working in the community and many of you were involved. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Kelly. We have Dick. Anyone else going to have a question? All right, Dick.
Well, first of all, I spent a lot of time reading this. It was sent to us in our packet, and it's a very thorough piece of work. I think you put a lot into it. I have some serious concerns about a couple of these suggested solutions. For the first one is this idea of eliminating or limiting APFO. If you have a school and there are not enough seats in it, there's a reason we have APFO. That is, you have to hold off further development that's going to add seats until you've got the seats. And if you put 50 new homes in, each with a couple of kids, that school's going to be even more overcrowded. So I think the problem we have with APFO is it's limited to 3 years. If the situation is not improved in 3 years, you still can't put the housing in. I think the APFO should be unlimited in length until the infrastructure is there to support the new housing. The other thing that has me concerned is you are reducing regulations and oversight on things that violate existing rules and regulations. If anything, when you change your regulations, you need more oversight. If you're going to have people putting strange things in their backyards, I think we definitely want to watch that very, very carefully. I don't want my neighbor putting an RV in his backyard and calling it an ADU. So we need to be very careful about anything that we add to by right, because you start making it by right, it's you're just opening just a box of horrors. The fees in lieu thing, I think we've all recognized that has not worked. We're not getting good housing spread around, or affordable housing spread around the county. Developers are simply paying fees that are not high enough to move the problem somewhere else, and that's why we don't have the diversity that we're looking for. The one thing that doesn't seem to be observed in here is that land cost is a major factor in our inability to build affordable housing. This is a very attractive county. People want to live here. You got supply and demand issues, and then jacks up the land costs, which jacks up the cost of housing, which makes it more difficult for us. I might need some more time. I can stop and let anybody else talk.
Actually, you get 3 minutes, and then you can get back in the
Okay, I'll get back in the queue if I've used up my 3 minutes.
Right. Why don't you finish that question, the last one, fee in lieu?
Okay, the problem with fee in lieu is it just moves the problem somewhere else. What our goal should be is to spread the affordable housing out all around the county. Right now, we have concentrations. One of the big problems that causes this is school districting, which doesn't seem to get addressed in here. And I will come back later because I have another point to make.
Okay, thank you. Kelly, do you want to respond?
Sure, I'll just clarify a few things, and Dick, thank you. It is very obvious that you read the plan, and thank you very much for taking the time to do that. I'll just clarify, APFO, the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, is a 5-year wait, not 3, so I just want to be clear on that. And also, the fee in lieu and reducing concentrations, unfortunately, that's really more a concern of zoning. Apartments are not allowed in certain zones within the county, and so to be able to, typically affordable housing is rental apartments or rental townhomes, so not being able to build apartments in certain zones within the county is really more of the challenge than the fee in lieu. The fee in lieu does provide funding, which we then turn around and use to help developers create more affordable housing units. And one of those examples the council will be considering later this month with the Roslyn Rise redevelopment projects, where they will be changing that development from 100% affordable to mixed income. So we will be supporting them with that with a funding request through a pilot. So, and you're absolutely right regarding land costs is a major hindrance to building affordable housing. So I really appreciate all that you contributed. Thank you very much.
Sherry? And then I'm in line next. Oh, Tina, you go next, and then I'm in line. Anyone else?
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate the very detailed work that this task force has done. And this has been an ongoing concern in the county, and I think you've really looked at it in a very broad and very helpful way by looking at all of the different pieces that have been involved over time. I have some concerns about the intersection between housing and environment. We only have 2% of land in the county that is actually available for development. So I think right now we are actually looking at a lot of redevelopment. And the fact that you've talked about rehabbing, renovating, repurposing older housing is a very, very good point. We want to be very careful about forestation. We want to be very careful about the climate impact on trees, on our streams, on our lakes. So we have a lot of very competing kinds of needs from the large scale. What kinds of incentives? You made a good point about that transfer tax being inadequate now. Given the enormous growth that the county has gone through and the projected growth, what other kinds of incentives have your group looked at in order to get more developers to move away from luxury and towards smaller, more affordable, maybe even LEED certified kinds of homes that include things like solar, but have a smaller footprint? I think that is very much in line with what I have been hearing from millennials, from Gen Xers, that they're much more interested in going in that direction. Have you thought about any different kinds of incentives?
Yes, we have. So through our HOCO by design process, which I failed to mention, this Housing Opportunities Master Plan is the data for our housing here in Howard County that is being incorporated into the HOCO by design general plan. And one of the things that we've talked about extensively in there is missing middle housing and how do we get smaller, attainably priced housing, different cottage style or manor style housing, smaller housings. And one of the things that, quadplexes or duplexes or triplexes on a 1 acre lot versus the McMansion. And how do we do that? And how do we incentivize builders to do those type of things? And of course, it might be waiving some fees. It might be reducing a parking requirement. It might be something like that. So there are some things in the plan that talk about some incentives that other jurisdictions across the country have done to incentivize builders to build smaller, more attainably priced housing. And I thank you very much for your opinion about redevelopment, because yes, that is very important that we consider the environment in any type of redevelopment projects.
Okay, Tina.
Thank you. I had a question about something you had mentioned. You talked about folks not knowing where to find support for housing, and then you talked about a home ownership support center. Is there a corresponding rental support center?
So what we called it was I think it is a homeowner navigator position, but it's more if you're living in the county, where can you go for resources, whether it be rental or home ownership.
Okay. And then the next question that I had, I want to make sure that I understand state funding for schools, which has a direct impact from APFO. State funding for schools for new school construction isn't released until the schools are overcrowded. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I'm not versed enough to be able to answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is right? Jenny, you know? Okay. So we do have to overcrowd the schools before we get the money to
It
build
gets
the new
more
ones.
complicated when you try and get maintenance on schools that are under capacity because of redistricting. Okay, anybody want to go after me? Okay, Lynn, and then Andy, you?
Yeah, I guess so, you know.
And then Dick, okay. Just a couple of quick questions. One, you really were talking about something I certainly support and believe in is economic diversity throughout the county. And then one of the examples you gave to Dick on the fee in lieu was Roslyn Rise. So in Wild Lake and Harper's Choice, where there were 100% low-income housing for forever from the beginning, to make that more like Hilltop and Monarch Mills and what is
Burgess Mill.
Burgess Mill in Guilford, was to increase density. And you're increasing density in the Columbia villages. So I guess at what point are we going to get in the county where you begin to have economic diversity outside of Columbia, and maybe the McMansions, instead of being only one family living in it, you do it in a way where there are actually 4 units, but it looks like one mansion on the outside, or be creative about it, or a lot of different approaches. But that's not coming across that you're really going to move out there. And in Howard County, by design, I really get a sense that they're really saying, we're not going to touch that. So the other thing is, what is your time frame for implementing the recommendations? And how do you plan to move ahead to create the Sustainable Housing Trust Fund? It looks like Calvin Ball has done a certain amount. The council held some of that money. But when will you respond to the county council so that there'll be specific criteria so that they can begin to release that money or even increase it in the next budget?
Right. So we are looking at when the administration will decide to put in legislation to ask the council to release that funding from contingency. We are looking at a couple different things right now. We are very fortunate to have money from the American Rescue Plan to help address some housing issues here in Howard County. So the county definitely wants to take advantage of using that federal money, but they do intend to go back to the council to try to get the funding for the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund before the next budget season. Regarding implementing the plan, there's 80 recommendations. We're going to take a few at each year and do our best to implement those once the HOCO by Design general plan is done. It is incorporating many of the things that we talked about, and it will give us the ability to move more of the recommendations forward. And regarding your comment of economic diversity throughout the county, there is real challenges with the limited amount of land that's left for development, and also with, as you know, moving the public service area. The HOCO by Design team did extensive conversations with the community about that topic, and they are available for listening, but that is a big challenge. Yes.
Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, I guess it's taking off on Ginny's question. The increased density that you mentioned was 20,000, and I know HOCO by Design said we need 30 to 40,000. Nope. Andy's saying no.
They've lowered it.
They've lowered it. Okay. Anyway, where do you see this 20,000 being dispersed? You know,
Right. If you look at the HOCO by Design drafts, or what they've come up with so far, one of the areas where there will be new housing will be in the Gateway business area. Regarding the rest of the units, whatever ends up being there or not, there is no place that 20,000 units would go all at once. There would be, as Ginny referenced, when you do a Roslyn Rise and you go from 58 units to 153, there's 95 new units. That's the type of thing that you're going to see is redevelopment projects or potentially new projects in the Gateway where you could see units, but you're not going to see any place where 20,000 are done all at once.
oh, I did not even imagine.
No, I know you didn't, but I mean, there's no place where we say this is where we can put that many units. It's going to be incremental.
throughout the county, or again, mainly concentrated in the Columbia or the developed areas?
Well, I cannot, again, these are going to be zoning decisions, and what type of units those are. Are they rental? Are they smaller, attainably priced homes? Are they big mansions? Are they townhomes? We have communities, I know of some communities in the pipeline already that are 300 and 400 homes in the Laurel area. Along, some of you have been down near the Laurel racetrack. You might have seen the Paddock Point community. There's 1,000 units planned for that development. They've just started, so you're going to see units over the next 10 years being built there. So they're not all going to be in Columbia, but they are going to be in Howard County.
Thank you.
Andy?
Thanks, Kelly. I do want to compliment your task force because they did a lot of research. I've been following it, and they have a lot of recommendations, many of them very good. Part of what kind of concerns me is we're in the situation where, as Dick has alluded, our land costs are escalating. I live in Owen Brown. And we've had probably the, I'll say probably the highest increase in housing prices I've seen in decades. I mean, it's just, it's like multiple offers coming in, 10, 20, 30,000 over. And Owen Brown is an older village. And I see that happening throughout the county. I mean, it's just, and even from when I talk to people, it just seems that the land prices are just skyrocketing fast, and existing housing, even when it's, I'll say, not the best, just seems to go for more than the asking price, which I think is a real challenge if you want to do affordable housing. The second thing is the building costs are escalating. I understand we talk about small houses and cottages, but those cottages might end up costing $200,000 and $300,000 to build. Because of the way the price of resources and things are going. So that concerns me too. I think Ginny and Shari alluded a little bit, but so you have the villages that were first developed in Columbia, Wild Lake, Harper's Choice, Owen Brown, Oakland Mills, Long Reach, and they have a wide variety of housing types. It's funny because I look at it and I say my village has almost all those missing middle housing types you have. I mean, we have small houses, 0 lot lines, small Victorians. We have duplexes. I know Oakland Mills has quads. I mean, a lot of different activities. And so what concerns me is I hear this, we need, more housing, we need more middle, but it seems that it's all targeted toward the first developed villages. I mean, even Enterprise, if you look at Enterprise, all of their activity is going to go in the existing 4 villages, I think, 3 villages. So from those of us in those villages, it just looks like those are the ones that are going to get the impact, to get the increased density. I
understand that. That makes sense to me. I understand that, and it's a valid point in Columbia. You're also having all the new development in downtown Columbia. But as you've all mentioned, there's very little land left to develop. Again, I'll point you to Paddock Point in Laurel off of Route 1. I'll point you to Oxford Square off Coca-Cola Drive in Hanover, which is actually still Howard County, where there have been thousands of homes put, thousands of or hundreds of apartments. I think there's over 800 apartments there. There are townhomes, there are condominiums. The same thing at Paddock Point. There will be apartments, condominiums, and townhomes. So I know that it seems that due to the Enterprise 5 projects in 3 villages, that it seems like all the development is happening in the Columbia villages, but I can tell you it is happening in other areas in the county. But again, I think the only area that's really left for development is the Gateway area for a large-scale development.
Right, that's probably true. It is probably the last large area left.
Right.
One other thing that kind of went through your presentation, which caught my eye, and that's, I got this disconnect because one of your slides at one of your presentation was we're in this problem because we were building too many apartments, okay, and McMansions, okay. But your solution is to build more apartments. And that kind of got me like, well, wait a minute. Our problem is we've been building too many apartments, okay, but our solution is we're going to build more apartments. So that's
No,
it was just a disconnect that I kind of.
Right. I apologize if that was what you got from that, and sometimes, I've done this presentation a lot, so if I skim over something or don't make something clear, I apologize. No, we are not advocating for more apartments. We are advocating for different housing types that are affordable at different price points. And that may be some apartments, but it also may be smaller ranch style or cottage style homes. It may be condominiums, it may be townhomes, it may be bigger homes, but we're advocating for a variety of housing types at a variety of price points for families who are at different income levels. But not right now, all of our housing, all of our for rent housing is not really affordable to any family earning less than 80% of our area median income, which is over $80,000 a year. And our for sale housing is not affordable to anyone that unless they're making over 120% of our area median income, about $130,000, $140,000 a year. So what we're saying is we have got to get some housing that is affordable to families earning less than $80,000 a year. Because right now, everything that we have, rental or home ownership, is just out of reach for many of our residents who work here. You know, who teach in our school systems, who work in our hospitals, who do the things that we need to make our community thrive. They don't have the option of being able to live here because if you make $50,000 a year, you cannot afford to rent a two-bedroom apartment here.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Dick, and then Tina, and then I've got a question.
Thanks, and I appreciate you straightening me out on the length of time for AVFO. I should check my details a little more carefully. And I agree with you completely about the zoning against apartments, which is just ridiculous. We have that problem in River Hill, which jacks the prices up quite a bit. But I would like to get back to this land cost problem. And it seems to me that the way to help equalize land costs across the county is by not taking regulations off, but rather to add regulations to pieces of property so that they have to be used for projects that would be more affordable. And so I'm a little concerned when we start talking about giving developers incentives. They've got a lot of incentives already. What they need are some disincentives. And that's something that's important to me. And again, I want to emphasize the importance of school redistricting. We are not going to get an integrated county socioeconomically or racially until we address school redistricting. And I know that's just a real hot potato, but we're just going to have to stand up and you know, because the only people who seem to be fighting hard on that issue are the ones who have what they consider to be the choice schools. They don't want to give that up. And they have reason to, because it affects their property values, and that takes us in full circle here. So some of the things we could reduce land costs is if we if we reduce the size of the lot size permitted, we reduce the house size permitted. We made sure there were adequate parking regulations so that people aren't out parking in the street or in their driveways. And so I'm looking forward to see where you go with this. It's a very necessary thing that we get some affordable housing in here, and it's a tough job. So appreciate what you're working on here.
Okay, thank you, Dick.
Thank you so much.
Tina.
I just wanted to make a quick clarification. The latest ACS numbers for area median income show Howard County at 120. And so 80% of AMI is almost $97,000 a year, not $80,000 a year. Did I hear you?
Right, we're at a state, Right, what I'm saying is, for our apartments here in the county, you have to make about $80,000 per year. You're right, Tina, I do just take around $100,000. Right now, the moderate income housing unit area mean income is $117,730. That was as of January of this year, which is the number that we use for our affordability calculations, but you're absolutely correct. 80% of that would be in the 90s.
So that's different than the number that the census publishes from the American Community Survey? Or does it lag?
It lags. So the number that I used this year was the 2018 area median income from the American Community Survey, and when I do 2022 pricing, it'll be the 2019 ACS number.
Okay.
Okay, I just have a couple of quick questions. One, the downtown, in terms of affordable housing, we can assume that your department is really overseeing that and enforcing it, and we will get the number of affordable housing units that the county's been promised.
That is correct.
Okay. The second one, you were, I think, implying that because of the cost of land and availability, that Gateway would be one of the best locations in Columbia for the type of affordable housing. But I'm not getting that sense from the Howard County consultants with the Howard County design. They're saying that as well, but they're also looking at the village centers as locations. And I guess, yeah, I think you understand the frustration in that the county created a lot of its own problem by not really enforcing MIHUs in Maple Lawn as one example. And I'm sure we could go down a long list of where the county has excused developers outside of Columbia and not required MIHUs because it just wasn't workable. There is a section of Maple Lawn, I think, that is requesting development now. I don't know how that's going to go, but are you going to enforce the MIHU requirement in that? It's just one example. And what about?
Yes, and so in Maple Lawn, not fortunately or unfortunately, but prior to me, so the developer was granted a waiver and allowed to place their MIHUs elsewhere. I do not. I've been with the director for 5 years now. We have not allowed any off-site compliance. So I do not anticipate giving Maple Lawn that choice, but it's not my choice to make. It is actually Department of Planning and Zoning. It is a zoning requirement. It'll be up to the planning board or whatever body there determines whether they have to do their requirement on site or not, and then I will just enforce that or enact that requirement on them. But it is a zoning requirement, so I don't make the final decision.
Right, we understand that, but you do have some understanding of why there's frustration when we see it enforced or in other areas. And Maple Lawn is one of the many examples outside. That's just one. What is it, the Milk City area that's going to be developed, does that then require MIHUs?
The milk producer's property does, and they intend to put their requirement on site.
Oh, well, wait a minute. When there's a requirement, I'm assuming you meant it would be on site. Always.
Yes.
In the last 5 years.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They're not asking for any. They're not asking for any movement or transfer. They are prepared to provide the MIHUs on site.
No, thank you. That's good. But when you just use the word on site, you concerned me about the last 5 years. I thought you had been saying you've been implementing the law, and I assumed that was on site all the time.
I have been. Yes, I have been. But you referenced Maple Lawn sending them off, and I thought you were asking me if the milk producers asking to send them off site. They are not.
Okay, no, this is a very welcome change. Thank you very much. Anyone else have a question? Dick, real quick, because we have 3 minutes left.
I want to emphasize the importance of context.
2 minutes left, actually.
A lot of the opposition you get to affordable housing is it just sticks out like a sore thumb. You need to make sure that things blend together. And so you can try alternate types of housing, but it needs to work architecturally and in terms of site and landscaping. I'd like to suggest, if you've not done this before, you drive down through Dorsey Search on Columbia Road, and you'll see a complete mix of housing. There's single-family, detached, there are apartments, there are townhouses, and you've got the full array.
Okay.
And so it can be done. It can be done. That's my point.
Thank you. Thank you all. Kelly, thank you so much for presenting. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, and thank you all for your attention. Have a wonderful evening.
And best of luck, and congratulate the task force on the work they've been doing.
I will. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next, discussion of the Howard County General Plan, 50 minutes. Andy, is that what you're?
Yeah, I guess it's me. Give me a chance here.
Can I make a quick comment
Sure.
just to make sure everyone that wasn't able to attend the Board Operations Committee is clear? So this evening, Andy and I think perhaps also Dick was going to be putting together kind of a framework for this discussion to be board conversation. So staff is not engaging or listening. At next board meeting, which would be the 23rd, is when Jessica Bella will be presenting kind of in response to listening tonight, how the general plan update and the status of where the draft is compares to either concerns she hears tonight or things that might need to be highlighted. So I just wanted to clarify, we determined during BOC to break it into 2 sessions, and Andy and really focused on board discussion this evening.
No, thank you,
And
Lindsay.
Andy got volunteered.
I do believe that's accurate.
Oh, come on, Andy, you were dying to do this. Go for it.
Absolutely right.
I was dying to do
And Dick was too.
Yeah. Okay, but I do want to thank the board. I'm not sure how many board members have been able to attend any of the most recent sessions. You know, but part of this discussion is so that the entire board can talk about it, because several of us were at different meetings, and, you know, each of the sessions discusses a little bit different things. So that's kind of really what, when we talked about the BOC, we wanted to have a general discussion with the entire board. So I did put together these slides. And so you're going to have to bear with me, because I'm not good at presenting here this way. But thought we'd just first look at the character areas, then talk about the key topics that are still remaining that they're doing on the general plan. I'd like to ask for observations, you know, from board members who attended, and then maybe what are our next steps. I do want to say that, you know, I really want to thank the county and the consultants for all of the sessions they've held, for all of the information they've posted out there. There's a ton of information out on their website on different reports, different agendas, different briefings. So that is really good. And then the other thing I want to remind everyone is there is going to be a special session on Columbia on September 22nd. Wednesday, September 22nd, and that's just focused on Columbia. And I would encourage, it's going to be virtual, 6 to 8, and you'll probably see more information. Jessica might have more for you. But I do want to encourage all the board members to sign up for that. It will be virtual. The consultants are really in the process of wrapping up the public input and beginning to draft their report. And so this is a good time, I think, for the CA board to kind of sit down and think about it and kind of get ready for when the report comes out. Just some general observations. The big thing, I think the big difference with this general plan is there's a significant focus on what they call character areas. And they picked this in particular to enable the general plan to focus on very specific parts of the county. And they choose this with character areas. The second thing I think you'll notice is that there is a lot more emphasis on the environment and infrastructure in the background information and in the general plan from the previous general plans. And of course, the real question is how much growth to allow for the next 20 years, because that's really what the general plan's about. So character areas, for those of you who haven't seen this, this is how the consultants have divided the county up. If you remember the previous general plan, you had sections like Columbia and Ellicott City and, Oak Ridge, things like that. This is kind of their interpretation, and they based it around the character of these areas. So if you find working farm, it's that color, everywhere you see that color, that's a type of working farm. Downtown Columbia is its own little center. You see multifamily neighborhoods, you see suburban office, and they're scattered around. But this allows the consultants through the plan to specifically address areas like a village center. They can, now that's called out specifically. It's not just incorporated in the overall Columbia thing, regional activity centers. But that's what the consultants are using as their basis for their character areas. And what they've done is they've taken these character areas and mapped them into basically what do you preserve, what do you strengthen, what do you enhance, what do you transform. And I think the important thing about this is you're probably going to see a lot of the general plan update focused on areas to transform and areas to enhance. Because if these areas are already preserved, you don't have to say much. And so I think you're going to see a whole lot. And so the first question for the board to think about is these are the character areas and these are the mappings. So if you think there's a problem here, if you think that maybe, to pick one, rural crossroads should really be transformed. Well, right now it's sitting in the areas to strengthen, and that means they probably won't say a whole lot about it. Whereas if you think that and they have areas to transform, like a transit activity center, and you think, no, I don't think we should really transform that. That should be something. So that's why this chart they have, this diagram, is important in terms of how the plans are going to come out. And Shari is sitting on the overall committee, so she can chime in anytime and tell me if I've kind of gotten this wrong. But I think for us, we just got to make sure that when they say the areas to transform are downtown Columbia Regional Activity Center, Transit Center, Village Center, Mixed Use Center, Rural Crossroads, and multifamily neighborhoods, that's where the bulk of the discussion in the general plan is going to be, and that's where I think we'll say the controversies.
Okay, Tina, Andy, I think Sherry has something to add there, and then Tina has a question,
Sure.
or, okay,
Yeah.
and then Dick.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. I think the structure that they started off with was even itself transformed a little bit from preserve, strengthen, enhance, and transform. And what we're seeing in Columbia, the discussion we seem to be having right now, is are the village centers separate and distinct kinds of activity centers, different from the rest of the activity centers in the county. They were designed in a different way. They are part of a master plan. They have worked for the last 50 years in a particular way, unlike the strip malls, unlike the rural crossroads, unlike most of the rest of the county. So putting everything in that general category of activity center is something that has not quite been sold yet. I did hear something very interesting at the last. I went to the first of these presentations, the draft report, which was supposed to be in person but became virtual. And this is what I heard from the consultant based on the feedback he was getting, that not every village center has to look the same way. So I think we have really gotten through on that that idea, that this is not cookie cutter, that in terms of character, our villages have, in fact, different characters, and that enhances the commercial value of Columbia, and having these distributed commercial centers as far as village centers are concerned. They are, in fact, in line with mobility concerns, with multimodal, all of the things that the county has been moving towards. So what we really need to look at in terms of design and zoning is how do we either strengthen or enhance these village centers? And that seems to be, Andy, if you'll agree with me, where the discussion is happening right now. That we want to make sure that they operate well, looking down the road to 2040. And we also want to see what can be brought in that is different, but not every village center needs to be treated the same way.
Thank you. Tina?
I would really value some fine-grained understanding of the difference between strengthen and enhance.
Okay.
That seems vague, and I would value, especially because you've been working on the definitions, what in the heck?
All right, well, I'll just give you my take on it.
I'll take that.
And bear in mind that there are 40 people on this public committee. So, but I think in terms of how we were seeing this, the question about strengthen is if, for example, there are things that need to be done by way of rehab, by way of enhancing the look of a village center. You're tweaking it. You're tweaking it, and you're also making sure that, for example, the stores are viable and that the look is sort of more modernized. That would be a strengthen type of thing. Enhanced is a bit more than that. And the discussion has been that in order to enhance the village centers, they must have residential. That's not a complete sell right now. People are saying when you start talking about originally, the original draft suggested that every village center was going to have 5- and 6-story residential with it. And there was pushback because not every village center is located in the same way as far as roads are concerned. Not every village center has the same kind of affordability needs. There are lots of differences, as you know, between our village centers, the ones that were built early and the ones that were built later. The issue of transportation and roads is absolutely critical to how people get in and out of any of these commercial centers. So do you enhance the roads? Do you have to start putting on lanes to accommodate traffic? If you build out the footprint, for example, of a village center, do you lose trees and grass surrounding it? There are all kinds of wooded areas around that are sort of slivers of green, but they really make a difference in how village centers are seen. Do we sacrifice that? So those are the kinds of questions that people are asking in terms of the differences. As you keep going up here, you keep ratcheting up the amount of change that occurs both to the footprint and to the surrounding area around the village center. Andy, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best way to look at this preserve, strengthen, enhance, and transform is preserve means very little change. And strengthen means there'll be a little bit of change. Enhance means, well, there's got to be kind of more, I'll say, moderate type of changes. And then transform is major. So what you're going is the scale. Very little change to it needs a lot of change. And so where these fall in, it kind of gives you an idea. Now, I will tell you, downtown Columbia, you have to understand, downtown Columbia is simply put in the area to transform because it's already been agreed to. And the rule set down at the very beginning is there will be nothing touched in downtown Columbia. The agreements have all been signed, the plan and everything. And so this general plan update is simply going to incorporate that. They're not going to make any recommendations. They're not going to make any changes. I mean, nothing. Downtown Columbia is pretty well done. So it's not going to be affected by this general plan update because of all the agreements that have been signed. So, but it has to be accounted for, and that's kind of why it's sitting in its own area. But when it gets to the general plan document, you're not going to see a whole lot. They're just going to basically incorporate whatever is existing in the downtown Columbia plan.
Follow-up question, if I may. You referred to transportation and then you only talked about cars?
No, I think it
And
certainly.
traffic and
I think it certainly has to do with bus lines. I think it certainly has to do with parking. What we do with
walkability, bikeability.
Yeah, with
Complete
what we do with
streets.
impervious surface, with bikes, whether we install additional
trail.
bike lanes, all of those things.
fixed rail?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Okay.
Potentially, mhm.
I'll give you my take on that, on
Thank you.
your question. Transportation is proving to be extremely difficult topic to address because of the low density. The type of transit that we would like just does not seem to be possible given the lower densities. And so if you read the documentations in the background on all the stuff on transportation, you know, they do talk about maybe rapid bus transit max. I mean, you know, they will get that in a quarter here or there. But it is very clear that the focus on the next general plan is still going to be on cars. Cars are going to be the major way people are going to get around. And then there's, well, can we at least make it walkable? Can we at least make it, give them paths and things like that?
Right.
But I think that they're having a really, really difficult time coming up with other things outside of the fact that we are so car dependent in this county and we have so little density.
Okay, let's go on to Dick, and then after that, Jess.
Yes.
So let's try and shorten the
Yeah, I'm going
statements
to
we're
go as
making,
quickly
please.
as I can on this. First of all, Tina, to answer your question, what do those terms mean? They're just buzzwords. I've been following this thing very closely, and these are some brilliant consultants. They have come up with a very detailed scheme, but it is the standard city planning scheme that could apply to Omaha or Atlanta or Denver or any place else. They really haven't seen Howard County as being a rather unique place. In terms of the districts, if you looked at that map, you'll see there are two districts, Western Howard County and everything else. There's very, very little recognition of the existence of Columbia. There's very little, they don't discuss Newtown zoning at all. They don't see Columbia as being a special district with its unique values and vision and heritage. And I don't get the impression, having been to a bunch of these meetings, that they're really paying a whole lot of attention to the feedback. They make a big fetish out of out of getting feedback, but I don't see from iteration to iteration they pay much attention to it. For example, they've got village centers. They talk about them as activity centers that need to be transformed. No mention whatsoever of the 10 villages of Columbia or any recognition that these are village centers, not activity centers. They don't. They talk about Gateway. They've got some terrific plans for Gateway. There's no mention there that it is part of Columbia. They talk about commercial corridors going through Columbia. I get visions of Route 40 because they seem to be very happy with that type of development. So I think this is a very good plan, but we have to, as representatives of Columbia, as people on the Columbia board, have to make sure that Columbia is recognized as a very, very significant part of Howard County. We are 1/3 of the population. This is the economic and cultural center of Howard County. And basically, this group has blown us off, and I'm very disappointed in it.
Thank you, Dick. Jess?
Yeah, I had a couple of just clarifying questions for you, Shari. So it sounds like, just from what I'm hearing, that really all this is boiling down to is what should happen at the village centers. Seems to be the big issue that seems to be floating up. But I guess my question is, you said people were not bought into the idea of them being, it wasn't clear to me if you were saying that some people think that they shouldn't be listed as areas to transform, or that they should be placed elsewhere. I just wanted to get a little more clarity around what kind of concerns you were hearing around village centers.
Okay, I'm just, the question was more about Columbia. So that's what I was focusing on as far as the village centers are concerned. And I think there are some areas, as Andy mentioned, of controversy. So that's where a lot of the concern is. That's not the only area of concern. For example, where ADUs are concerned. Would ADUs fit into Columbia's villages the way they have been designed? The question of, and I'm going to disagree with you, Dick, because the question of Newtown has certainly come up. There's certainly been a lot of sensitivity. The consultants have visited all of the villages. The question of zoning is paramount to whether you switch over to mixed use or whether you continue to have commercial centers that are just commercial. What happens to the business parks, especially the older business parks? It's not just about Gateway, although people see Gateway, and here I'm just going to give my personal opinion. I remember when Gateway was just being generated as a place, and in some ways, Gateway never quite achieved the vision that we had hoped for at the beginning. So the idea of repurposing this large area to answer some of the pressing needs in the county is not a bad way of looking at it. There is concern that we not keep throwing down more impervious surface, that we not keep taking, and there is no virgin land left really in the county. That was shocking to me. I have to tell you.
No, I guess I'm trying to clarify what the concerns are around the village centers. Are there people who believe that they are miscategorized in areas to transform? It sounded, I thought I heard that in what you were saying, or it sounds like there's some resistance to the idea of putting housing at village centers. I mean,
in terms of the suggestion that every village center needs to have the same kind of housing, or that there's a cookie cutter, that regulations would be written so that every village center would have X, Y, Z, at this height, with this type of thing. I think there has been some resistance to that.
But not necessarily resistance to the idea of having housing at all.
Not necessarily, but I think it's going to be village dependent. And this is where the input from the villages is so important as far as this survey, as far as these presentations are concerned. So I agree with Andy. I really hope that everyone will go out and get your village boards to participate, get folks in your village to do these virtual sessions, let them see what this mapping looks like, and then let's get their opinions in, because these folks are going to be driving on the roads. You know, this is really important.
Yep, that answers my question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it was the lack of
Okay.
individualizing the village. And Dick, do you want, I mean, Andy, do you want to continue on your
I was
presentation?
going to
Okay,
just go
let's
to a couple more slides, because we started actually getting into some of the
Gotcha.
items that are coming up.
Why don't we give you a chance to do a couple more pages before we ask
Can I
questions?
just-
this is just
one
another-
question, though. You say there's Newtown zoning in here. I went through the entire presentation, I don't know how many pages of it. Newtown zoning is not mentioned once in this document. Enough said.
Okay,
Okay, so this is another slide from the consultants that really shows where they're concentrating, once again, and then it follows on to the explanation of what they're talking about. So definitely, I'd ask you to look at that, keep that in mind. Once again, as I said, this is where the consultants are going to make recommendations, making, changes, things like that. And so this is the part we definitely want to pay attention to. And it shows you exactly where these things are located. And by the way, when they talk about a regional activity center, they just mean gateway. That's it. That's the only one identified. So they just call it a regional gateway instead of gateway. So there were 5 remaining key topics, and to me that says that a bunch of other things have already kind of come to some consensus. Okay, so they're focusing on kind of these 5 remaining areas that they're still trying in their mind, what to do about. And they're the rural west, the activity centers, housing options. I mean, we just had a little talk before about housing options, the environment and growth management. Now, there are a lot more slides, and I just kind of copied, I think, some of the end slides to show you what they're doing. But in the rural west, I think what they're really talking about is, can you really make changes in the rural west? Because of the infrastructure, and in particular, and the cost of putting the infrastructure. I got to admit, one of the consultants made a really good point. He said, would you rather spend your tens of millions of dollars putting infrastructure in the West, or would you rather spend those tens of millions of dollars fixing the problems in the East? Because you only have this money, so what are you going to do? You're going to expand it into the West, or you're going to fix the East? So that was kind of an interesting thought that he had.
Andy, quick, you want to talk about number 2, because they do make 2 exceptions to that.
Yes. If you read the background material, it is literally not possible to expand the PSA boundary in any type of economical way, any way that the county could afford. But they did talk about 2 possibilities. The Howard County Board of Education school site, their headquarters site. And I was on the meeting with the guy from the school district, who I think was not that pleased with this idea.
Loveless.
Yeah. And then the Maple Lawn West as 2 possible areas to expand the PSA boundary. Those are even those will be controversial, because I don't think the school's actually in favor right now. And I believe Maple Lawn just got turned down by the planning board.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so the thought of expanding the boundary is going to be very, very controversial. And then a focus on maintaining the agricultural part of it. Another interesting thing that came out, in case you hadn't known, is the county has spent $175 million in agricultural preservation in the rural west since the program started. It's a significant amount of money. I think it's like 26,000 acres have been basically preserved. That program, what it does is it buys development rights from the farmland. So whatever the development possibility is, the county pays them, and then they can't develop the land. But it's a significant chunk of money that the county has expended to basically preserve the rural west. Activity centers, important for us, as Dick alluded. would just say that I'm very happy that they pulled village centers out as a special category, because then that means we can write regulations, right for the village centers, and not have them just kind of stuck in with the other centers, like on Route 40 or things like that. So I think that's actually positive for us. And as Shari said, the key is what regulations do you write. But at least if you identify them as a separate category, then you have the possibility of focusing just on those village centers. The other thing is, which I think is received very positive, is do a master plan for Gateway before you start developing it. What a novel approach here in the county. That's like,
That's just crazy.
And it's a good plan.
it is. I mean, it's a really good.
They came up with something that really works.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I'm thinking like, yeah, we got to support that one, boy.
Okay.
But that's activity centers. And you can tell the big focus really was on Gateway, and they didn't really talk about a lot of the other type of activity centers. Housing options, probably I think the most controversial is the ADUs, as Shari mentioned, and probably one that we in Columbia need to pay very great attention to. At some point, I suspect we're going to have conflicts with our architectural guidelines on ADUs, because right now you cannot build a separate ADU in Columbia because of the architectural covenants. It's just not allowed. But it's something we need to pay attention to, something we need to think about. And I tell you, we're going to come up a little there. Although they've spent a lot of time talking about ADUs, and even in the housing master plan, they're not proposing a whole lot of them. When you get to one of the slides, you'll show that they're only talking about 500 total throughout the entire county. That's it. And there's a reason for that. But
Andy, they're saying as a matter of right, so this would be where we need legal counsel, because
yes.
If it's a matter of right, the zoning is changed, can the covenants really?
Well, yeah, they can still. They can still, because you can't subdivide your property in Columbia without covenant approval.
Well, okay, we won't discuss it now.
But right, there's lots of
Once
things
zoning changes, and you can do a lot. State law changes on covenants, but anyway.
Now, I think another thing we should pay attention to is number 3. The whole idea of establishing design requirements so that any type of, I'll say, missing middle or ADUs fit into the neighborhood, which I think would make it much more acceptable in general. And so, I think for us, we might want to think about this as a very important point. So you get the housing up. Environmental, I'll ask Shari, but I would say that they actually came up with a lot of good points about the environmental. And I think probably one of the points that we make sure is that the final update does stress the importance of environmental, because as Shari alluded, environmental can reduce the overall development. And so there will be a lot of pressure to water down the environmental stuff. Shari, anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, I do. I think this is where design standards and requirements become so important, not just guidelines.
Yeah.
And I think that has gotten through loud and clear. I think a lot of people would be a lot happier if some of these proposed zoning changes and requirements were actually included in the report, but I don't think that's going to happen because of the nature of the charge here. But I do think that is, we have to have much more stringent requirements for developers in terms of how that new housing is going to fit in with the environmental concerns for climate change. The county has spent enormous funds because of some very tragic events, and nobody here wants to see any of that repeated. Every time we get one of these really big storms and it passes over Columbia, I sort of say there, but for the grace of God. But we can't really be thinking that way. So we have an opportunity now. And the public group pushed this very strongly. I was very gratified to see that it made its way into this report in a much stronger way. We have to keep the pressure on to actually come up with some suggested best practices so that our testimony goes in that direction. I think we have a very important role to play that way.
And I think with these 6, you see kind of where the report is going to put its focus in terms of the environment. They've kind of identified these 6 items, and that's where I think you're going to see the report.
The other thing I really liked about this is this idea of linking greenways. And this is so much in keeping with Columbia, that rather than having isolated pocket parks or things of that kind, it's about linking the greenways so that biking and walkability and transportation, all of that becomes a linked network. And I think that will make a tremendous difference. And that goes for the western part of the county as well. That was really positive.
Now, the one, I'll say, kind of new idea that they came up with is in number 3. Consider using the Agricultural Land Preservation Program funding as a potential model to address the environment. And I just mentioned, the county spent $175 million on the agricultural land preservation, and it was, I thought, a rather interesting idea to then think about, well, maybe now we need an environmental land preservation program. So that I thought was kind of a good idea, and we may want to think about that as to whether, depending on the parameters, that might be something, to push for.
Dick and Tina?
Yeah, I want to emphasize that this plan is a good plan. Yeah, I mean, it's 90% of it I have no trouble with all. I think it's really advantageous. It's just this fact that they have ignored Columbia that has me very concerned. It just like they just don't want us to exist. And the ADU thing, it's just symptomatic of this. This is state-of-the-art city planning. And it's a one-size-fits-all type of thing. The ADUs are just horribly trendy these days, and so they popped them in, and they've got a couple of other concepts that are trendy. But we really need to make sure that Columbia gets recognized for what it is, and not just swept into a general.
Yeah, I didn't hear any discussion about whether there should be a planning board or not. Tina?
I wanted to ask 2 questions, please. We're talking a lot about green building, and I'm wondering, was there any discussion around, can we go there? Can we say nothing is built in this county ever again from this day forward that doesn't meet minimum LEED standards? Period, paragraph, end of argument, we're done. Everything from now on. Over.
I mean, theoretically, yes. If the county council would adopt legislation, you can certainly put that in. But that's not going to come out, I think, of this report, because that's more the next phase, the implementation of the regulations.
Yeah, but I think how this report actually gets written will make a difference as to whether those requirements are actually put into effect. Standards, design, and environmental requirements. Now, California has really been in the forefront of doing this, requiring that new development, new housing has solar panels. I think we're certainly seeing from the federal level that there may be money there to move in that direction. So Howard County may not be on its own, may be able to tap into that. And that would be an innovative, front of the wave kind of thing. I would love to see that. I would love to see
this really more future thinking, but get it in as a requirement. We did have an Environment and Sustainability Commission a number of years ago that I was on, and the legislation came through that required all new commercial development to meet minimum LEED requirements. So that went through. We've got it for commercial. Why shouldn't we have it for the precious new housing that's going to go in? And I really mean that. It is precious. I don't know whether you guys saw the Washington Post had a great article about population growth in this area, and I just want to read you a couple figures. Howard County had 15.8% growth in the last decade. That is huge. I looked at it twice. 15.8.
That would be 30%.
We went from, in 2000, from 247,000 to a population of 332,000. That is enormous. 20% Asian, 19% Black. And that is a very important number there in terms of the changes in the county and what we're seeing and where some of the housing pressure is coming from, which we really need to acknowledge. We are a different county now than we were 20 years ago, certainly 30 years ago. So the 2% buildability, you know, we've already done all that building. So now, how do we respond to the needs of our residents? And I think that it's just an ongoing issue. I'm not as sanguine about the issue of transportation as you are. I suspect that some of these laws and rules that we have gotten about transportation, about density, and about all of that, will shift in the future. They are not written in stone. And when you start talking about electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles and things of that kind, I've already talked with some people at the county about point-to-point transportation and what that would mean rather than bus routes. That opens up the western part of the county. So, you know, there's a lot of great things. I think more things will develop from this initial report. And transportation is going to have to be looked at differently.
So, I mean, I think you made a really good point, and
Sorry.
The one thing that I would like to mention, there are on the horizon some, you know, interesting possibilities coming. But the difficulty is you don't want to base your general plan for the next 20 years over the assumption that some technical solution will be developed, you know, 10 years from now. And so that's where you'd much rather want to make sure that that technical solution was actually coming, available, than to just say, we'll do it. But that's, I think, the difference between Chari and I. I kind of want to see a little, a little bit closer that it's in the horizon, and not kind of say, yeah, it's coming maybe someday, because it's like downtown Columbia. You know, Rouse started it, and 50 years later, we're still building it. It's coming, but not that.
Well, point to point.
Tina had another.
Okay, all right,
exists right now.
let's realize we got 15 minutes left, I think, right?
We actually have 9 minutes left.
9 minutes.
Yeah.
So my second
She's watching the
question,
clock, I'm
I
watching,
am,
I'm
she
in
is.
trouble.
my second
All right,
question,
let's-
Shari, was
anyone that
something
hasn't asked a
specific
question?
to something that you had said about linking green spaces or pocket parks. And I'm wondering if there's any vision for that to be an and. Link up as many green spaces as possible and celebrate pocket parks where you can put them.
It's a very good point. Thank you.
Okay. Andy, you have 2 more pages, I think?
Yeah,
to go,
so just real quick on growth management. Actually, it was very nice to see that raised as a topic. It shows that they were thinking about how do you actually implement and kind of, you know, manage the stuff. But you're going to see here in growth management an enormous focus on schools. Clearly, schools has been a major topic in all of these sessions and all of these discussions. And so what's going to come out of that, I don't know. I have no idea. But the last one, and this one I want to really have you focus on. So this is a 20-year general plan, 2020, 2040. What you have to understand is that already there will be 15,200 new dwelling units added to the county over the next 20 years based solely on what can be done right now. It's already in the plans. 7,000 units are already committed. I mean, that doesn't mean they're going to show up next year. It's just they're going to show up over the life of the general plan. Downtown Columbia, 4,600. Once again, that'll come over a number of years, but it's already committed. The two areas, and Shari has alluded to this, there's only 2% left in the entire county that is not developed or under a committed development type plan. And the max you can build at the moment is 2,024 dwelling units, and that's it. The other one, and we've seen this happen more and more if you watch through the development tracker, is the infill. This is where you have, a 1 acre lot, but you could build 4 houses. And there are actually, probably 1,500 dwelling units, they estimate, that can be done. And virtually, I think every development tracker we've seen for the last year has shown more and more of these infill occurring. And the projection is it's all going to get infilled because the land cost is so expensive. But so if you look, even if we don't do anything, don't make any changes to the general plan or that, over 15,200 dwelling units are already scheduled in the pipeline to be built over the next 20 years. The bottom part is what the consultants are thinking in terms of above and beyond that 15,000 dwelling units. And they're talking about 7,800 new dwelling units added across the county for the next 20 years. And this is where you see that they're only thinking of 500 ADUs. That's it. And I'm talking, and remember, this is across the next 20 years. So even though they talk a lot about ADUs, when it gets down to the actual numbers, they're not really proposing a whole lot of ADUs. If I can tell you now, I'll let Shari then, she can have a chance at this, but
And
there are
Dick
two
has
concerns I
something
have
too.
on this. One, they don't have anything for Gateway. So that means they're not looking at any possible, dwelling units in the next 20 years over Gateway. And where that concerns me is the thing you don't see, and we'll talk about it probably at a later date, is the infrastructure. There are serious questions about how much development can occur in the eastern part of the county based on water and sewer. And I think already I'll double check, but I think already 80% of the sewer capacity at Little Patuxent is committed. I mean, that's how close we're getting. And the difficulty I have here is if you don't put any dwelling units in Gateway now, there may not be any possibility to put any in. So although I understand there's 7,800, I would like to see some of that 7,000 in different activity centers shifted up to Gateway just to hold because we really do want to use Gateway to solve a number of problems. You're gonna have to give them a number of dwelling units so that the water and the sewer and all the other stuff is there whenever it gets around to it. Otherwise, forget it. You can have the greatest plans, but you won't be able to implement them. Shari?
Okay,
Yeah, I
thank you.
absolutely.
We've got only about 5 minutes, so Dick, Sherry, and who else?
I just want to reemphasize what Sherry said about the environment, and it has affected Columbia. just a couple of years ago, Route 29 was underwater, and a big hunk of our Lake Kit pathway got ripped out. And needless to say, we have to dredge our lakes regularly because of all the crud coming down from upstream. And we put a lot of money into stream restoration, which is pretty controversial with some people, don't like to see that done. And that's all water coming down into Columbia from other places. So these environmental issues do affect us and affect us very directly.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, I agree very much with what Andy just said about Gateway. I found it very startling that talking about Gateway with a master plan, making it into another kind of village, using very much the same kinds of approaches in Columbia, but then not putting in the number of units. And I think we need to shift the focus from infill, and we need to shift the focus away from when this says different activity centers, they're mainly talking about the village centers in Columbia and building up. So I think Gateway can actually relieve a lot of the pressure on Columbia density and the lack of the ability to expand roads here. If we look at Gateway being repurposed to a planned and innovative type of village community with greenways, with walkability built in. But I was very startled to hear the cost of beefing up water and sewer. And when we looked at the west and the issue about the PSA boundary, we never got the information about what that would actually cost. So that's sort of hanging out there still, folks. This question of where we put our money in the future. There are rural crossroads that once had a lot more activity. And I think it's worthwhile to perhaps explore some of these shared water and sewer for some of these multiple dwelling units. And to think about that type of thing rather than the huge investment in the water and sewer infrastructure requirement. So, you know, I have some concerns about the money concerns. And if you put those additional units in Gateway, you must put in additional schools. And the school calculations in general do not include the costs of repair and maintenance over 20 to 30 years. And that is a big gap in the county's thinking about schools. So there are still a lot of unanswered questions. But Andy, thank you for your overview here. I think it's been very, very comprehensive.
Okay, Andy, I just have one quick question for you. The chart that you were just using, different activity centers with 7,300 units and then Gateway with 0. What I'd like to know, because on the other chart you have areas to transform, or their charts. It says Village Center Activity Center to transform, but it also says Mixed Use Activity Center. So to me, they have to really explain what they mean by different activity centers. Is it just the village centers, or is it more than that? See, I think they took out Gateway here because we were complaining that it should be taken out.
So Ginny, it's more.
Which,
in fact,
different activity centers is more than the village centers.
Yes, and actually that's, I'll say, a concerning point, because even at the village centers, they were only talking like 200 or 300 units.
That's what I'm, well, yeah.
Right.
So how do you get 7,300 other than a lot going to Gateway?
Snowden, Dobbin.
Yeah, the parkways.
Route 40.
The parkways.
Right, and that's the other thing that concerns me is instead of focusing the growth in Gateway, they're talking about making significant changes to the business, the business parks, the commercial areas and things.
Yeah, I my own opinion, I think that the board should consider a position where we do recommend that they have units in Gateway, and that'll lessen the number for the village centers. Okay, Andy, I want to thank you and everybody else. I think
Jenny, can I just ask the board a question?
but
We're going to have another discussion September 23rd, which staff is going to lead. Jessica's working on it. What additional information would you like for that meeting? Is there anything? I mean, if you just think about it for maybe the next 2 or 3 days, we certainly would need to know by Monday. But if there's any additional information, please let Lakey know.
I think it'd be nice.
Lakey's.
Well, I think it'd be nice also if you shared it with the
Yeah, you
whole
share
board,
with the
any
board,
questions
but we
you have.
definitely need
Tina,
to
you
know
got a
that.
quickie?
Yeah, population projections for the time period that this plan covers.
Okay, okay. All right. So again, thank you, and thank you guys that took so much time, Andy, Dick, and Sherry, to work on this project. Thank you very much. All right, next, close to the last, is most recent development tracker. Now, that is questions only. So is Jessica on?
Yes.
Hi, Jessica.
Hey, sorry, I was still writing notes from the last time.
You thought we'd never get to you, huh?
No, just a little backtrack. Hey, guys. Do you guys want to ask any questions?
Yeah, the whole idea here is questions. Anyone have a question?
I received your questions via the survey response, so I do have those in hand.
Can you either speak away from the mic or closer or something? There's difficult to.
Is this better for you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
Jessica, why don't you start with the questions you received?
Sure. All right. So I'll go through those. Regarding the South Lake office building, I did provide you guys a more detailed memo of sort of where we're at in that project proposal. There was a question about if there would be any guarantee that there will be public parking available there in perpetuity, and if we could show where the easement would be required. Regarding the parking, it's really too early in the process to answer that question, but it's something we can keep in mind as it moves through the review process. That question was raised in the pre-submission community meeting. I think all of you are aware that there is no public parking on the lakefront right now. It is all privately held land. So that is not something that is currently provided. So it's something that we have in the back of our minds. It's something that is viable and identified need, but there's not a mechanism to achieve that necessarily. So we'll continue to evaluate these projects with that in mind, though. And regarding the easement and where the map was to go, there is a very slim sliver of land between the existing Lake Kit pathway that wraps around the southern half of Lake Kit and the parking lot that serves Haven on the Lake. And it is this very slim parcel that they would require an easement on. So, Jenny, I can send you guys an email with a map showing what the parcel looks like. But it's literally the existing green space that connects that parking lot to the existing trail. Did that solve that question?
Yeah, I think that was a Nancy McCord question also from the past, right? On public parking down at the lakefront, she'd raise that every year. Is there any way we can guarantee it? And we all know that, no, we don't have any rights to public parking down at the lakefront. It's not our property. But I understood there'd be some parking available in the parking garages as they're being built that would be public parking. The question is, if that's supposed to be true, the question is, for how long? Can we guarantee it'll be there forever? I guess not.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to go back and look at the downtown plan related to parking and how they're handling parking and any agreements that are being done, because I'm most familiar with the agreements that were required to be associated with the Merriweather Post Pavilion and ensuring that there was enough shared parking across the entire downtown area to host events. So I'll go back and I'll look at that and if any clarifying information I find. The next question I received was about the alternative compliance request in Faulkner Ridge, just short notes. This was about a failing retaining wall and a request to replace the wooden one with a masonry wall. We were looking in to see, because it adjoins our property, we were looking in to make sure that it wasn't a current enforcement issue and that it wouldn't be one. So we're just going to check the boundaries in that area and make sure that it's actually shown accurately, since the form that was submitted with the alternative compliance place is not a survey. But there are no concerns related to the request itself. We just always want to make sure that homeowners have enough space to be able to maintain and access structures they build on the property without having to utilize the open space. There was a question on the environmental concept plan for the 7-Eleven in the Village Center. Jimmy, to clarify your question, when you say CB29, you mean CB29 2009 that dealt with the major redevelopments in Village Center?
Correct. The bill that required each village board to develop its own village center plan, yes. Would this project have to comply with CB 29?
So the way that CB 29 is written and the way that the Newtown regulations handle redevelopment in the village center is that if a village center boundary has been established either by the zoning board as part of major redevelopment proposal or by a general plan amendment, then any development that happens within that established boundary goes through the process for village centers. And we've only had, Wild Lake is the only village that's gone through that. Hickory Ridge is currently going through that. So although there are community plans that have been developed for most of the village centers, those do not establish the village boundaries. It has to be a zoning board or a county council to do so. So instead what's going to happen for Oakland Mills, because those boundaries have not been established through that process, is simply going to go through the process as if it is being developed on a Newtown parcel that's not part of the village center. So it's going to go through all the normal hearings that any other Newtown parcel will go for the planning board, but it doesn't have to go through the steps for a village center redevelopment because it's a single parcel. Mm-hmm. So that's, and I think I've been working with Oakland Mills, so they're aware of that, and they kind of go through their own process.
Exactly.
You guys had a question about Woodmere Retail, which is the site that is adjacent to the Lakeview site. And I think Andy would have to answer the question if the Jenny had asked the question of whether the Owen Brown Village Board has taken a position on this. I'm not aware if they have. I understand that the developer has presented the plans to them. But I've kicked that one back over to Andy, not put him on the spot.
Actually, luckily I have the answer. The board has not taken a position yet. They've discussed it, they've had presentations, they've had exchange of emails and that with the developer. But what the board wants to do is wait and see exactly what gets submitted and also what the technical report is, and then they'll weigh in. Does that make sense? Yeah, so they haven't really taken a position yet.
Yeah. Jessica, I think one of the other questions, like we heard from Brian England tonight, who seems to be under the impression that there's county regulations that prohibit the county from considering retail in employment centers. I don't know whether it's that with Broken Land Parkway or Snowden River Parkway or that, but is that true? Is there any regulation that would prohibit retail next to the employment center zoning?
So, no. The answer is no.
Okay, I thought that's what you were saying.
No, I think it's a misunderstanding of the terminology in the last general plan. So the last general plan identified a desire to limit the perpetuation of strip centers.
Right.
But strip center is not a defined term in the Howard County regulations or in that general plan. So you have to go to kind of the general consensus on what the dictionary definition of a strip center is, which is essentially it's a linear shopping center, typically fronting a major roadway. And that definition, frankly, applies to the majority of all commercial development in Columbia. So it's not a very defined definition to apply to that goal. So use is permitted on this site. We were involved heavily in the Lakeview site around design issues because the board had expressed a desire to protect the character and the view sheds that are part of the Broken Land Parkway area. And so there were several design details that captured that intent. And so those are the design details and characteristics that we applied to the Woodmere site. And it differentiates itself from the Lakeview site in several ways that I can go into if the board desires. But it is the uses are not what is permitted or not permitted. It's all of our concerns have been about the design and ensuring that character that you guys have defined for us.
So one quick question. Lakeview then was not turned down by the planning board hearing officer and is now before the Board of Appeals on the issue of retail not being allowed. Retail could have been allowed there as well.
It's not a question of use for use, and that was not why. Well, the planning board, in their discussion of why they disapproved Lakeview, they said this design is characteristic to us of a strip center, and the general plan has indicated that we don't want to perpetuate it. So they identified the design issues around it. But they were not saying this is not an allowable use, but they were saying the design that is being proposed is not a good fit for this site, and so they denied it on those factors. And we presented testimony on the narrow issue around design for them that they also concurred with. And then that has gone to the hearing examiner, and it now goes to the Board of Appeals.
I got it. So if Lakeview were to come change the design, then, okay, I got it. Thanks.
I think that answers all the questions I received. Are there any additional ones?
Any other questions, Sherry?
Yeah, I had a question about the proposed medical center. Wasn't that originally supposed to be further north along the lakefront? I'm trying to think where. Am I right about that? And then it got switched over. I thought this was supposed to be a small residential. Do you know why that got switched?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, Howard News kind of proposed that they want to kind of establish a health and wellness area all along the lakefront, both in the lakefront core neighborhood as well as the lakefront north neighborhood. On the final development plan for the lakefront core and the one that was adopted, this was the site that was originally proposed as a residential building. But there's a note on almost all the FCPs that get approved, data check, that essentially says you can move around the use within the FCP area. So it provides minimum and maximums for different use types, but it doesn't lock you into where they're located. And I believe that there are several considerations for why they decided not to pursue residential on the site, one being that's in the floodplain, and it's significantly harder financially and regulatorily to build residential in a floodplain than just to build a commercial area. And so that's, I think, why they did the switch.
Okay, and I guess, so is this in addition to all of the commercial? In other words, did they ask for a waiver or a variance of some kind for additional commercial?
No, so they still have their minimum and maximum for their total uses. So since they're proposing this and if it gets approved as office, it's going to count towards the total amount of offices they can build on the lakefront core. So what we will see instead is that there will be some shifting of that residential to somewhere else, some other parcel within the lakefront core XBT area itself.
Right, and is this, okay, and is this height, the height of that building the same as what was originally proposed?
Actually, it's short. So the maximum building height in that area is 9 stories and 120 feet. And what they're proposing is 6 stories and I think 76 feet tall. So it's significantly shorter than the maximum allowance that they're allowed to have there.
Okay, but it takes away all of the public area that's currently being used. That it would take up the whole footprint.
Well, no, if you look at the design
It was very
plan,
hard to see. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was just very hard for me to see what it was actually looking like.
yeah, so what they've actually done is they're proposing to leave essentially the first 2 rows of parking in front of Haven and sort of pull themselves away from the Whole Foods building a little bit to provide some visual and distance between those buildings. So those will still be daylighted surface garages, and then there'll be a 2-story garage that serves as the parking directly for that building. And then there's some sorted pedestrian and drive access connections that are also being proposed in bridges. So it's not taking up the entire parcel. And I think from a user standpoint, if you drive down to the mall, there's not a lot of difference for you parking in that garage or parking on the surface lot in terms of people who visit that area now. Because right now, the current lakefront core area has shared parking arrangements where all the service parks there serve all the different uses there. So I think that's going to be a continuation that we're seeing. It's just that those service parking lots are going to be transitioning to structured parking.
Okay, but we don't know whether it's going to be free.
No, we don't know that it's going to be free or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jessica? Thank you, and sorry you were last. But you were great, okay. All right, last item, proposed new topics. Anybody have some new topics they want to suggest for the board? Going once. Okay, thank you. Anybody want to move to adjourn?
So moved.
Tina, second. Lynn? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you, everybody. Okay. Thanks a lot. Sorry about the late start.
Oh, we got up and running. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah. The guys did a good job, Lakey.
Well, obviously, it's an